And now we get to the draft. What a time it was at Chickies and Pete's in South Philly. We had an awesome draft party along with our friends at Broad Street Hockey. Gritty was there. It was tremendous. He made me chug an ice cold Coors Light. It was a nice experience.
Yeah.
He squeaked at me. It was very funny.
Yeah, it was very funny.
But Charlie in Las Vegas, the Flyers, of course, are not able to trade up to the 5th, the 7th, whatever they were working on. The 4th, I think, was reported with Columbus. And they eventually trade back one spot. They're sitting at 12. Zeev Buium still on the board. They go, nah, we're good. We'll take a 3rd rounder next year to move down to 13. And then go a little off the board with Jett Luchanko. Now, Charlie, we played yesterday or Saturday, whatever it was.
Days unreal.
Yeah. We played your scouting, your pre-draft scouting video for Jett Luchanko. And seems like there's some positives there.
I like
Dude
him as
has
a
a ton of speed. We talked about his age. He doesn't turn 18 until like August 21st, I believe. So he's a very young prospect. Has some puck skills on an awful juniors team.
Yeah, it's not good.
What did you make of the Jett Luchanko pick?
Well, as I said, I like him as a prospect. I had him 20 on my board, and I like him as a prospect. I think the upside is there. I like the physical tools. I like the player. He's a fun player. I really, really love Zeev Buium. He was the number 3 player on my draft board. I think he's going to be really, really good. So for me personally, as someone who has watched these prospects and someone who felt, I mean, I certainly would never consider myself to be a draft expert. I'm certainly not a scout. But I did research before the draft, about 2 months worth of research, and I came away very excited about Buium's potential. I personally disagree with what they did because I would have ran up to that podium and picked Zeev Buium at number 12. I would not have traded down. And they didn't do that. So for me personally, it's disappointing because I think Buium is going to be real good. However, I am not of the opinion that my evaluation of this player and these players as a whole is infallible. I'm not a draft expert. I don't know. They clearly were of the opinion that Buium and Luchanko, for them, were around the same tier quality of player. And their view is that if we're looking at 2 guys who we have rated around the same, given our organizational weakness at center, and given the fact that we already have quite a few smallish defensemen that are in our projected top 4 for the foreseeable future, we're going to say Ty goes to the center. We're going to go for Jett Luchanko. So I understand where they're coming from. I disagree with their valuation of Buium. Sure. I think Buium is better than they think he is. However, we're not going to know who's right until 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I am not of the opinion that, like, I am the smartest hockey mind in the world, and just because I think Buium's going to be a stud and I think Luchanko is probably just going to be good, that's definitely going to be the case, and I'm 100% right and they're 100% wrong. I personally would have taken Buium, but I'm not necessarily right.
One thing I do want to point out is those comments that they made explaining the Buium passing on him. A lot of people, and not just Flyers fans, but like national media people, like I saw a lot of people interpreting that quote as Danny Briere doesn't like small players.
Well, of course, it's Twitter.
Which is absolutely not what he said or what he meant.
They've been saying literally since the day that like Keith Jones got hired that they think it's important for there to be size on the defense. Mm-hmm. And it's actually kind of funny that the way it's been is that they traded for Jamie Drysdale. That the guy on the blue line who they like the most is Cam York, who's small. That's why you're like, okay, this is probably not the decor they ideally want to build. Mm-hmm. And they're building it because of just the way things have played out. That's why it was definitely going to play a role in their draft decision. If they're going to take a guy 12, that guy is almost certainly in their mind going to be penciled into the future. They probably weren't ideally going to be taking another smallish defenseman unless they looked at that defenseman and they said, this guy, we think he's going to be a number 1 game-changing defenseman. I think Buium is that, so I would have taken him. They don't, so they didn't. And that's what it boils down to.
Fair enough.
Oh, like Danny also told us, I think at that pre-draft presser he did, that diversity in the
which again, yes,
in the
diversity in the
it's
organization.
not so much
and the
that he
prospect.
doesn't like small defensemen; it's that we have some.
Right.
That said, all right, if you want to bring up Jamie Drysdale, that's fine because he is a slight guy. I wouldn't necessarily call Cam York small, although he is under 6 foot. He's 5'11" and almost 200 pounds. And I gotta believe once he develops a little bit more, he's going to be bigger.
And I don't think Buium's going to be small either. He's just not big.
But I just think like if you're accounting like, oh, and we have Emile Andre, one is considerably better than the other.
They really like Emile Andre, and that should serve as a reminder that they really like him. They view him as part of the future.
I guess so. I just think of like, yeah, then why isn't he here? Like he's not. He made the team last year, got sent down, and there ain't no path for him coming up this year.
Well, there are always going to be injuries. They could make a Ristolainen trade at some point. There's a lot of ways for him to come up here. It's just there isn't like we're penciling you into a spot because I think they believe he could benefit from another year down in the minors because they personally, and this is another thing they probably disagree with you on, they personally look at it as there's nothing wrong with overcooking a guy in the minors. There's always more things he can learn down there. We don't need to rush him. That's their view. Again, you can disagree with it, but that's their view.
History disagrees with it.
Speaking of history, I just
Who are these players that have come up from the Phantoms and been great for us?
Okay, well, the Flyers.
I just feel like as
there's Duncan Keith, who was down there for years and then became a Hall of Famer.
He was in the AHL for 2 years. One of them was a lockout.
I'm just saying.
Emile Andre is Duncan Keith. Charlie just said it.
What I'm saying is that the idea that like guys can't come up at an older age and still be really good is faulty.
I would just like to know who they are in this organization's history.
Okay, well, the Flyers don't tend to develop defensemen well. Maybe in part because they've rushed them in the past.
Who?
Yoni Pikkinen, maybe?
Yoni Pikkinen? That was 20 years ago.
Well, you're saying in their history. I'm giving you defensemen.
Like Samuel Morin cooked for a while, never came up.
Ivan Provorov, possibly?
Everyone knew the Sam Morin pick was bad the second it was made, though. Like, that wasn't a question. Like
it took like 3 coaching staffs in the NHL to get something out of Travis Sanheim. Just saying, like, I just don't know who these players. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna do it this.
I'm not
who
ready.
Is this guy?
I'm not ready to write off Emile Andre.
I'm not
because
writing
he's
him
not here.
off. I think making determinations at the draft because there's a guy available at 12 because of some dude you got a few years ago, not in the first round. Like,
no, it was the second round.
Is in the AHL, like,
and they like him.
Okay,
they're looking at him as part of their future defense core, and that's 3 guys who they view as smaller. So they were basically looking at it as we're not going to take another smallish defenseman unless we think he's a stud. They don't think Buium is a stud. My disagreement is I think he is. But like, if Sam Dickinson was there at 12, I think they take him.
Oh, I think Dickinson is one of the major reasons they.
Small.
Yeah. But forward's different, little bit.
I know, but just getting back to this pick, like as Flyers fans, I feel strongly that over the last 5-10 years, we should have learned a lesson that like analyzing this information 2 days after the draft is kind of useless. Like there have been consensus top 3-4 picks that turned out to be shit, like Nolan Patrick. There have been players that go later in the draft that everyone thought was going to suck that turn out to be very good hockey players like Claude Giroux. Like maybe we just need to say like, all right, maybe this isn't what I would have done because me on Twitter, I read a lot of stories and I read what Charlie wrote. So I wanted them to take Zeev Buium, but I don't fucking know. Nobody does. And none of us are going to know for like 3 years.
It's not
so we can revisit this and be mad about it later, but like it could be fine.
Jett Luchanko might end up being one of the top 3 players in this draft. I have no goddamn idea. That I'm not disagreeing with the pick. It's the process used to get here is more what I'm worried about. Like, I don't know, if Emile Andre was going to be something that we really had to account for, like he'd be in the NHL.
Well, see, here's my counter to that though, because obviously one of the things that we justifiably give the Flyers a ton of shit for is flubbing the Nolan Patrick pick. And what's the story of the Nolan Patrick pick? The story of the Nolan Patrick pick was you had a guy at 2 who was the consensus top 2 pick, who, if the Flyers had passed on Nolan Patrick the day of the draft, us, and then we in the media in general, would have absolutely raked the Flyers over the coals.
Lost our minds.
For how dare you not take the...
What are you doing?
The guy. Because he was the guy, and everybody says he was the guy, so they took the guy. And Ron Hextall, by all accounts, more or less overruled his scouts, who told him Miro Heiskanen is the better of the two players. He's the higher on our board. And Hextall was like, nah, I'm taking Patrick because we need a center. And also, you can't say this didn't influence him even a little bit. If I don't take Patrick, I'm going to get killed for it. And then in retrospect, it's like, well, man, they should have friggin' taken Heiskanen, not just because of the injuries that Patrick dealt with, but because it looks like Heiskanen is just a damn much better player than Patrick ever was going to be, even without the concussions and everything. And what we've said is like, you know what? It's your job to be right. It's your job. Who cares what the consensus was? Who cares what everybody said Patrick was going to be? It's your job to be right, and we're going to give you shit because you fucked up. Well, in this case, it seems like the Flyers, I think Buium's better. I thought Patrick was better back then than Heiskanen. And so did most of the public people in terms of Buium versus Luchanko. What did Briere do this time? He went with his scouts. His scouts think Luchanko is going to be the better player. Right now, I think he's wrong because I think Buium is going to be better. But at least he went with his scouts.
Yeah.
At least, like, he picked the guy who he thinks is going to be better. And a lot of this depends on how much you trust Danny Briere, and that's fair. Maybe he hasn't earned your trust, and if so, you're going to be more angry than the people who he has earned their trust. But he went with the guy who he thinks is going to be better, and we'll see if he's right.
And we talked about this while you were out, Charlie, that a lot of people seemed pissy that he seemed to be drafting for need because the Flyers need centers. But my argument is that he's drafting for need 3 years from now.
Right.
Like, he's thinking about a Mitchkov team. And what does he need? He needs someone to get him the puck. And by everything that I've read over the last few days, Luchanko's very good.
Seems like he's a hell of a
getting
distributor.
people the puck, which they're going to need. So, like, yeah, will he be like the best number one center that comes out of this draft? Probably not. But if he fits in 3 years onto a Flyers team that needs a guy that's able to get our sick goal scorer the puck over and over again, like, that seems good. So, like, maybe they are thinking about building that team and not building this team.
They definitely are. I mean, they have a vision of what they want this team to be. And they're just really high on Luchanko. I mean, it's abundantly clear that they've loved him all draft year. You know, somebody asked him at the draft, that's Briere at the draft, did Luchanko's very strong performance at the Under-18 World Championships influence your decision to take him? And Briere basically said, no, actually, we didn't want to see him do well at the Under-18s because we kind of were hoping we could get him with the second first-round pick. That's what we were hoping all year. And then when he goes out there and blows it away at the Under-18s, it's like, well, shit, now we might have to friggin' take him with the first one if we like him.
Of course, Florida gets all the way to and wins the Stanley Cup. So if you're hoping for like 22 and it ends up at 32, a little bit of a different situation.
Indeed.
We all silly like the mayor.